We aren't guessing. There's no reason for you to freak out unless you like doing that. And if you're probably watching this, you're probably a Georgia fan, which means you're probably going full melt Larry Munson right now. But Matt DeBerry, the fact of the matter is, Georgia will play in the SEC championship game, but we don't know who they're going to play yet. We do not know who they're going to play yet. I think this is the first time that I can recall that Georgia's come into this weekend not knowing who they're going to play. I think in 2002, the LSU-Arkansas game was decided on a last play of the game, Hail Mary, which Arkansas won, and Georgia beat beat Arkansas in 2002. This time they got Texas and A&M. Who is a better matchup for Georgia to go against?
Well, I think the obvious answer, what seems obvious, would be A&M. But I tell you what, I know it's tough to beat a team twice, but I think the quarterback situation with both teams, I'm not sure Georgia would want to go up against Marcel Reed, who kind of lit up Auburn a little bit, over 300 yards. He appears to be growing as a passer week by week. His guys aren't catching the ball in quadruple overtime, so, nothing he can do about that. But we saw what Georgia did against Texas, and they mauled their offensive line, Ryan. And Jalen Walker is still living in the backfield in Austin, Texas. So they had a great game plan. And if you're Texas, you've got to make adjustments. But how many adjustments can you make if you can't block that Georgia front seven, right? So I don't know how they come up with something to make things better. But I don't know if Quinn Ewers is going to play against the Aggies. It could be Arch Manning this Saturday and in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So you can make the case that if you're a Georgia fan, you might want to see Texas again just because of the matchup. We've seen mobile quarterbacks, do pretty well against Georgia, and Marcel Reed is absolutely that. I think he's playing better than either quarterback at Texas right now. So I think, we'll see who the better team is when they play against each other. But if you're a Georgia fan, I'm not sure A&M is the best matchup compared to Texas.
I think that Georgia-Texas rematch, for Georgia's perspective, would be a little unique because usually you don't want to play a team again. But this time it would be in Georgia's backyard in Atlanta. And last time like Matt said, they crushed them on the defensive side of the football out there in Texas. It was crazy. Me and Dean were out there. That was one of those environments that you remember. And Georgia didn't play well at all offensively. Other than running the ball well on short fields, they put together a great drive I believe it was between the third and the fourth quarter. It was around that in the fourth quarter. Put together a great drive. You see a Carson Beck trick play to Oscar Delp. And that was kind of it. Other than that, Georgia couldn't really put together drives. I don't think they'd have that much of a hard time doing that in Atlanta, a place they're familiar with, a place they've already played this season. So I don't think you freak out about, they're rematching with Texas if that's the case. The truth is this Texas team in the last month or so hasn't looked great outside of the game against Florida when it was playing Florida's third-string quarterback. So I don't think Texas plays so hot. I don't think A&M's playing so hot either.
No, they're not.
Right? I mean, they got smacked in the face at the beginning of that Auburn game. Good on them to claw back. Marcel Reed's good, but they got smacked by South Carolina. I think all three of us predicted that to happen. I think that if you're Georgia, you feel pretty good about both these matchups. I think you'd rather play Texas again, though. Like Matt's pointed out, that Marcel Reed guy can really run around.
Yeah, some good points about both, playing both situations. I think Georgia's in a good situation either way. Watching Alabama lose, or monitoring Alabama lose to Oklahoma the way they did, not just that they lost. I mean, I think that's probably what got rid of Alabama from the college football playoff and the SEC championship, both at the same time. But I mean, to me, I think you'd probably rather play A&M. I think they're not as good a team as Texas. Notice the line at A&M where Texas is about a 7-point favorite. Georgia, I think, would be at least a 4-point favorite against both these teams in Atlanta. I think they might be more against Texas A&M. It could be as much as 9. So I think you'd rather play A&M. I was talking to one person in football that I trust a lot, and he said, if you're Georgia, you'd rather play A&M. I think the thing about it is, Matt, is like Isaiah Bond at Texas and sort of all the things, the injuries are catching up to both Texas and Georgia. Georgia may have gone through their injuries. Texas is dealing with them now.
Yeah. and that could really hurt them Saturday night.
Yes.
And I think Texas A&M's inconsistency, I think you've got to love that if you're Georgia. I mean, against Auburn, some of those receivers were making some big-time plays, and then the next series they're dropping balls that hit them through the hands, into the chest, and it's just way too inconsistent. I like their quarterback play, but like you said, I think Texas overall is a better team. They've got more collective talent. They've got a staff that's been in the system for more than a year, right? I know Kalen DeBoer did it this year. That was in Tuscaloosa, but it's hard for a first-year coach with a brand-new staff to beat a Kirby Smart-led team. Alabama did it. I don't think Texas A&M could do it. But like you said, I think Georgia matches well physically and in the trenches with both these teams. We'll find out a lot about them on Saturday night. But I think either way, like Ryan mentioned, I think Georgia's got to really like where they sit against both teams.
Hey, Ryan, let me throw it to you like this. Since they beat LSU in kind of a pretty solid win over the Tigers, they've lost by 24 at South Carolina. They lost on the road at Auburn. Those are both rough looks for Texas A&M.
Yeah, on the road, and I think if you're any team other than Georgia, this game is kind of road adjacent, and for Georgia, it's home adjacent, and they're familiar with it. And the other piece of it too, this will be the fourth straight year that Georgia goes to the SEC championship. They're familiar with the situation. Which team gives Georgia trouble in that building? It's not going to be Alabama, and that's not doesn't really actually matter between all the white lines, but it's a little bit of a mental thing there. I think for A&M, it's just they do one thing really, really well on offense, and that's run the football. Georgia showed multiple times this year, mostly this past game, it's susceptible. Over 200 yards. I think 170-ish for both Alabama and Kentucky in those games. All three of those games completely different the way that they panned out. But that's what A&M does well. It's also missing its starting running back. I will say Le'Veon Moss was really good. He's out for the season. They've been missing him this past month. I think you can kind of notice that. But both Texas and Texas A&M have good front sevens. I think they have similar defenses in terms of
the defenses
how
are both good.
Yeah, but offensively, I mean, if you're Georgia, you know how to beat Texas, and that's to just you got to get in the backfield. You got to make Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning panic a little bit. Their offense completely crumbles when that happens. I think that A&M's a little bit more one-dimensional. I know that Marcel Reed's getting a little bit better as a passer, but that's an Auburn defense. That's desperation time. They're coming back and making big plays. So I think that it's more one-dimensional stopping A&M, but they can do it well.
I'll say this quickly. I don't think Texas A&M's defense is as good as I once thought. I mean, Peyton Thorne stinks, and Peyton Thorne kind of lit them up a little bit. And that A&M defense, you could tell, was getting tired. They were getting gashed. When they're all healthy early in the game and they're flying around, they do look good. But as the game goes on, that's a defense that can kind of fall apart. And I think if you're Georgia, you got to like that. But, something that this crew has seen over the last several years is when Georgia plays a team that's new to that environment on a big stage, and during warm-ups, what's the other team doing? They're looking up in the stadium. They're taking pictures. They're taking it all in. And I don't know if Texas or Texas A&M has played in Mercedes-Benz. I don't think they have. But I can see it right now. This is a business trip for Georgia when they come to the stadium. They're very comfortable. And I can see it right now. Texas, those players get there. The A&M, the stage could be too big for them. The SEC championship could be too big for these teams right now. And when they get into that building, which is, again, like you said, basically Sanford Stadium West, unless they're playing Alabama, it could be really tough. And if you start turning the ball over and making mistakes early, that crowd can really jump on you and it can kind of domino into something. We've seen Oregon and Clemson. When they get down to Georgia in that building, it just falls away from them, right? And before they can try to climb back in it, the game's over. So it is a tough environment for other teams, not named Alabama, to play against the Dogs. So it could be rough out there for whoever wins that game Saturday night to play the Dogs in Atlanta.
That's a wealthy crowd, the Atlanta crowd for the Georgia games. It's also a very loud crowd, which is sort of the opposite, you would think. But it's a very loud crowd. Here's my question to Ryan first, and then Matt, why don't you hit it up? Everybody, I mean, we know what happens if Georgia wins this game. They go to New Orleans. Ryan gets to experience the Sugar Bowl and all of their festivities. They do a great job over there. But what happens if they lose this game? Are they certainly in the playoff?
I think just knowing what this committee has done already, I don't think it's safe to say certainly. But I would have a hard time at this point with the way everything's shaken out, seeing them drop Georgia. There's been so much talk this season. And now there's also been talk about strength of schedule, and the committee's not listening about that. But there's been so much talk this season about how you can't punish the conference championship losers. This is a different committee than last year's committee. I know what they did to Georgia last year. It's a different group of people this time. We don't know. That's the honest truth. We don't know how it's going to get punished or not punished. I have a hard time seeing Georgia fall out of the top 12. If you're stacking it up against the other SEC, at that point Georgia would be a 3-loss team, assuming they beat Tech. They would have more wins. They would have the fact that they got to the SEC championship. They
Had
wouldn't
better
have
wins.
as bad of losses.
Yeah, all of
wouldn't
it.
be able to put Ole Miss and Alabama over Georgia if it was one of those teams. I don't think you'd have enough for South Carolina to slip in, or maybe Clemson. Georgia would have the head-to-head over Clemson. I just think that Georgia's in good shape with the playoff, the way that things probably will shake out if they lose. Maybe not a home playoff game, though, at that point.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be a home, Matt.
Yeah, I think they would get in, but I think, if you're the committee, you've got to think big picture now and what kind of precedent do you want to set? If Georgia loses, or anyone loses the SEC championship game, and you're going to just be like, oh, third loss, second loss, or whatever, you can't move a team back for playing an extra game. I think teams should be rewarded for getting to the SEC championship game, and I think at some point, they'll be too automatic, right? The SEC champ's already automatically in. I think whoever loses that game should get in too. You want to tell these teams, hey, you want to be in the SEC championship game, right? You don't want to sneak back in. You should be rewarded for being one of the two teams at the end of the day to play for an SEC title. It should be automatic. But at the end of the day, there's no excuse for Georgia to lose to Texas A&M in Atlanta. You lose to the Aggies.
I agree with you.
Complete disaster. Texas is another thing, right? They were number 1 this year. They're number 3 right now. I get that, but win the games. Win the games. Do your job. This team is not going to be hunted. Remember, we heard that 2 years ago. Georgia does the hunting. So you go out and you hunt the team in front of you on the biggest stage, right? Lose the game, then you are leaving it up to a committee that doesn't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Take care of business. That's what it should be. They should go out fighting. They should go out hunting. Do your job. And there is no crying or complaining if you get left out. Do your job. They can do it, Dean. So get it done.
Matt DeBerry wraps it up for us. Watch us on Riding Home after the game. Tech and Georgia Friday night. It'll be after midnight when we put it up. Thanks for watching.